Good morning, my soul brothers and sisters. Okay, today's topic is God's timing. And I love to talk about this because I feel like I've never heard anybody else talk about it. And I feel like the amount of blessings that happened in my life because of this are the biggest blessings I've ever had. The most profound breakthroughs, the most profound blessings I've had are all because of what we're going to talk about today. So let's see if I can articulate this the way that I want to. #words. Sometimes putting big experiences into words I find to be an adventure. We'll put it that way. Okay, so here's the bottom line of it. As an example, I went from welfare to my first $1 million in 25 months. And I made that $1 million, $40,000 months, etc., with zero faith, understanding, or even thought of ever accomplishing that. Not once ever did I say, oh, I'm going to make $1 million. Oh, I'm going to have 40K months. Never. I was making $500 a week. I was in the nursing program. And I felt God's timing. So what everybody was ranting around me was like, you're top of your class in the nursing program. You only have 1 semester left. What are you doing? You're crazy. Why would you leave? And I didn't have the language back then, but the language that I have now is because I'm trusting God's timing. Because when I trust God's timing, I don't need to follow the rules of spiritual manifestation and all these other things that have these labels of how it has to go. Not that I disagree that they work profoundly, they do, but that's not the only way to do it, right? It's not the one and only way is to do it this way. In order to follow the rules, I would have had to visualize myself making that $1 million, and I would have had to have perfect faith that it was mine. It wasn't even in my warehouse of possibility on any level whatsoever. I can promise you that. I mean, it was just like the year before that I was writing a check for $1,700 and I wrote $1,700 on the check and they had to give it back to me. Like, no, you have to write $1,700 because my brain couldn't even comprehend that much money. Like $1,700 was a mind-blowing amount of money. So there's this really extraordinary, powerful principle that for me and my world, and I can't speak for anyone else, and I'm not going to pretend that I understand like the deepest, I'm not an awakened being who understands the deepest universal principles and how they work at the root of it, But I know my own personal life experience, and I know at the time it was unheard of what I did. It was completely unheard of. It's just not what I did. What happened? What happened was completely unheard of. Nobody had done that. I had never been in a business. It was just me and my phone, and I just literally just kept moving as the way I felt God's timing. Like God's timing was, this is done now. I'm done here at this nursing program now. I got the confidence, I got whatever it was I needed from that experience, and it was time to move. Having the degree never mattered. Having whatever else never mattered. Maybe it does for some people. Right now I'm getting my PhD in metaphysics, right? So and that feels good to me. That feels like an expansion for me. But leaving behind the nursing and, I went to neuroscience for a little bit after that, and that still wasn't it. And I explored like, oh, what is this I'm being asked to do? And I made 1, 2, 3 steps, feeling it through, realizing I'm being guided and prompted to start my own business. To which, of course, I was a waitress, a Marine, and a nanny up until then. Literally never even worked inside of a business, let alone run a business. So when I actually quit my nanny job, actually quit school, and started my business, everybody freaked out. Everyone and their mother freaked out. I had no thing in my head of like, oh, it was going to go global in 3 months and all this stuff was going to happen. All I knew was I felt the timing in every cell of my being. You know what I'm talking about. You know that urge that you get, that like sensing that like this now, this thing. And it's like, and then our brain goes, yeah, but, and then everybody around us goes, definitely not. And we're like, okay. And then we don't. And then guess what? Imagine if I had listened to everybody. Imagine if I had ignored the timing that I felt in my body, because it made no friggin' sense at all to quit. Made no sense at all to leave my job when I had 2 children and I was on welfare. Made no sense at all. And this was a job that I could take my children with me, but I did. And I did because I felt that strong sense of timing. And then as I started my business, I felt a timing of other things, right? Like, so I'd be doing really well, and then I would feel this like big pause, this big resistance, and I would trust it. And it was incredibly, extraordinarily uncomfortable. I do not want to portray on any level that this was like effortless and I was just like, oh yeah, pause, oh yeah, go. Every move I was making came with just mountains of doubt and fear that I got to put down and continue to trust God's timing. And to be really honest with you, I don't even think I knew that that's what I was doing. I mean, I have some awareness of, like, I grew up Christian and I have some awareness of God's timing, and I know that I had some awareness of it, but it wasn't like I was locked into the fact that I was trusting God's timing. It's just what I was doing. That sensation in the body, I trusted. That voice inside of me, I trusted. And I trusted it just enough to be able to do what it asked me to do consistently. So as I started this, I would just go, right? Like I just move, and I would make my move. The company went global in 3 months. I made my first $1 million in 25 months. And it was just like this phenomenon of a story. All of my clients would come to me. It was so effortlessly for me, right? So I was a health coach, and I did a good job, right? Like all the other health coaches was like, how are you doing that, Mandy? I made like $4,000 1 month, not months, one time. And most of my peers were like, how did you do that, Mandy? And now most of them were smarter than me. They were better than me at all the things, basically. And so I felt a little bit of like, I don't know. What do you mean? And then I'd be like, well, okay, what are you doing? And they would tell me, and I'd be like, that's interesting. And it didn't make any sense in my brain why they were doing that. So I would just ask like, well, what made you do that? And then they would tell me what they thought. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting thought. Where the heck does that come from? And I would realize it wasn't driven because it's what they felt called to do. It was driven because of some kind of fear, because somebody else told them to, because that was the script that they were supposed to do, because yada, yada. And I would be like, oh, and I would just offer them how I think about it and how I see it. And then bam, 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 everybody started making tons of money. And then they would tell everybody else, and it literally went around the whole entire world. Now, if that's not God's hand, I don't know what is. Do you think Welfare Mandy was just so brilliant that she caused all of this to happen? No way. It was consistently God's timing, because watch what happened. I was a health coach. Then they asked me how I did it. And then I told them. And then my feedback made them make a bunch of money. And then when they went and made tons of money, they told other people, to which then people came to me to ask me more about that kind of business coaching, that mindset coaching, the wealth coaching. And then I felt the moment when it was time to move in mindset coaching, into business coaching, right? And I found myself being a quote unquote wealth coach as I was cutting up my debit card from the government for free food because I was on welfare. And I remember when this woman hired me. I did an enrollment call with her. She hired me. And I found out like the next week or 2 weeks in that she was this CEO of a major financial institution. And so I messaged her and I'm like, oh, maybe you didn't realize, like, I'm honestly just getting off of welfare. Like, I don't think I'm the coach for you. She goes, oh no, you're the coach for me. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, anyone who can show up and do what you did from the place you were at is the person I want to learn from. And I understood what she meant. I just did. I said, Roger that. And we continued coaching. And I coached her for, I think, about a year. And it was extraordinary for both of us. It was such a wild adventure for me. It was so amazing to support someone at that level. Someone who I would have thought before, would have wanted me to not stand next to them in line because I had so much like white girl trash vibes and there had been so much abuse and so much poverty, and I just had this like story of myself and my lack of worth that way. And here I was coaching this person, and it was just such a beautiful healing experience for me and her. And so again, it's not like my brain could comprehend that I'm going to be a wealth coach for a major financial CEO head while I'm cutting up my EBT card. Do you think my brain could it definitely could not. I did not even almost be able to comprehend this. It wasn't like I was manifesting it and I had the clarity to say, I'm going to be coaching some extraordinarily wealthy people, multimillionaires, right? Legacy owners. No, that never happened for me. And so in my innocence back then, I didn't know that was a phenomenon. I didn't know that was completely out of the norm. I didn't know that everybody else had a rule that you have to believe you can have it first and then you can finally have it, which I want to say absolutely works. I think OG Jesus was very clear about that, and it absolutely works. When you are the frequency of something, you are aligned to match for it. I mean, that's not even debatable anymore. We know that that's a fact. I'm only saying trusting God's timing for me is even more powerful than that. In my life, it is an infinite shortcut. So instead of needing to do the work of going through my brain and having to convince my brain of things and rewire all my thoughts and yada, 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 there's a sensation in my body that says, go now. Now's the time. Do the thing. And I've consistently trusted that. So I've consistently trusted it in ways where I say yes to things and I make massive big moves. I'll quit, I'll start, I'll launch, I'll shift, whatever it is. But the flip side of that is I also trust when it's like, pause, rest, no, not yet. Like when my whole body is calibrating to something, when my whole life has changed so dramatically, like I've gone through so many vision boards where they just all happen and I move to the next one. It's happened so many times that my whole system, I feel like most people listening to this training probably know exactly what I'm talking about, right? To some degree. And your whole system has to recalibrate to the new reality. This happens with spiritual awakenings. It happens when transformation happens to such a degree in your life that it's unrecognizable. There's a cracking and a breaking that happens in all the best ways, and you just kind of crack and break, and you need to rest, pause, and recalibrate. There's been other times when trusting God's timing was an incredible challenge, and I resisted it and got my butt kicked for it. And then in the end, I trusted God's timing and saw, had you trusted it the first time, the second time that God led you to that, then you would have absolutely had an easier experience. So one of those examples is, so I went from welfare, had all this, wealth. I was having like 82K days at some point, and it was just an incredible amount of money just coming from everywhere. And people were paying like 30K packages on the spot without even enrollment calls or nothing. So then I went through the season, and then after that, I got divorced, and the business had been successful for 4 or 5 years. I don't remember exactly how many years. I think it was the 5th year. I was single. I was on the other side of the divorce. I was like the most excited I had ever been about life. I was finally away from all toxic and abusive people. Nobody was trying to control me and put their thumb on me. Nobody was taking all my money. Nobody was threatening my kids. We were safe. We were here in Florida. We had this big, huge, beautiful home with the palm tree that I envisioned right in the backyard. That was one that I manifested. I sat down and journaled that the house would have a palm tree right where I journal, and there it was when I got here. Manifestation works. And so, in that season, I had reoccurring revenue for the whole entire year. And I just decided to really back off that year. I really wanted to dive deep into my feminine energy and find myself, right? Because we grew up just, a lot of trauma growing up. And then I went in the Marine Corps, infinitely more trauma. Then I got pregnant at 19, and then I was a mom, and then I was a mom again, and I was dealing with toxic abusive relationships. And it was like I had never just been Mandy. Even when I was a kid, we had 6 kids. So I was sharing a room with my sister, and I was the oldest daughter. So it was like I never just got to be Mandy. And the little bit of freedom I had in the Marine Corps, I was definitely numbing out and getting drunk all the time because I couldn't handle the abuse that was happening there. And so I was so young. I was like 17 when I went in the military, and I was dumb as a box of rocks. So here I am at this year, and I just want to take the year to myself. So I do. I can. I have a year of paychecks coming in, and I continued all my one-on-one coaching and everything that I had committed to. But, over the year, it tapered down and tapered down and tapered down. Now, the next year, I had committed to being single for a year after I got divorced, and I did that. And so that next year, I remember I was in Guatemala. Bailey was there with me. I took her to Guatemala. I was there with a bunch of friends, and I was on top of the mountain in Guatemala, and I just flipped out. And I'm just like, that's it, God, I'm done. I'm done with all this. And I just was like, I'm manifesting Greg. That's it, right? I didn't know it was Greg. I was just like, that's it. I want my partner for life. Now, I will do another course on how to manifest your soulmate. And it's like nothing you've ever heard in your entire life. It's definitely not like write down all the perfect things about him and then become everything that would be a match for him. Like, who's going to do that? That's like, welcome to being single for the next 10 years if you're doing that. It works. I'm sure it works, but it's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous. I think that's a silly, very long, drawn out path. Okay, anyway, I digress. I'm on the mountain and I'm telling God, that's it. I want him, and I want him now, right? And I just felt that timing, right? I felt the timing after being a year of single, and I felt the timing like it's go time. Yes, it's ready. I'm ready. And so I did. And literally, as I was walking from the place I was at down to the cabin I was staying in, Greg texted me. Now, he had been messaging me for about 6 months. And somehow in that moment, and it had nothing to do with what I just said, because just at the time I was traveling a lot. I had so many guy friends, and like guys were just reaching out left and right. And so mostly I didn't notice. Like, it took something pretty big for it to get my attention. And it caught my attention in that moment in the perfect way, of course, because for 6 months, this man had reached out to me with absolute patience. Turns out he only lived a mile down the road from me. And not once, every other guy starts telling me how they'll pick me up in jets or yachts or whatever, or come pick out a yacht with me, whateverness. And then the other guys would be like, oh, I guess you're too good for me. I guess you're too busy for me. Some kind of snarky comment, which is no big deal. Both of those are fine. They just felt like par for the course for me. They just felt like dime a dozen. Nothing about it caught my attention is all I'm saying, right? And some of these men were, I'm sure, lovely, extraordinary men, but it just didn't catch my attention. This did, because I was like, for 6 months, this man has reached out, and he's always lighthearted. He's always vulnerable, just sharing. He'd really love to meet up with me. And never once has he gotten snarky. Never once has he tried to like convince me of his worth. He just simply keeps inviting me. And I was like, that's it. Okay, Mandy's going to do, he'll be my wingman. He lives a mile away. I'll go meet him, and he'll be my wingman, and we can go travel together, do what together. And, I'm going to find this man of my dreams. And that's how I met Greg. Now, it was God's timing again. It's not just in my business. It's not just with money. It's also with relationships. It's also with my health. That's a whole other thing, right? That's been my weakest part of my life. And so I meet Greg, 2 years, we move in, we're meshing the family together. I find out he's, been through this extraordinary trauma, has this extraordinarily abusive person he has to deal with. We walk through all that. We get taught, we get therapy, we get coaching, we learn how to stabilize ourselves through that. We do all this. In the meantime, which I have to remind you, I've been self-sufficient my entire life. I've either, even when I was on welfare, it was just like I was hustling, I was working full time, I was going to school, I was taking care of other people's kids plus my kids. I never got, support with that. And so then I was like, okay, It's been like a year and a half. My business, like I think I was only making like 30K months at the time. Like I had gone like it just had gone down, 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 down. And then I wasn't having like the drive to go back to the business. And I was so confused, and I was praying about it and I was crying about it. And just like, God, what do you want for me? Like, I need to start making money again. I need to provide. Like, this is all waning down. And I had changed and grown so much, so significantly. And I was like, I just don't know what I'm doing anymore. And so every time I would want to control it and go back to the business and start creating again, I would like create one thing and then it would fizzle out and I would lose interest. Create one thing and it would fizzle out, which had never happened before. I was just like, go, 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 miscreation. And it was so much fun. And I was so confused and I was crying. And then Greg came to me. He's like, can you please just let me help you? Like, can I please take care of you? And I was just like, no, that's not how this works. You don't understand. Like, that's not how God works in my life. Like, you don't need to do that, because I will just go to God and I will just manifest, what I desire. I will just, I know it'll happen. And then again, another 6 months, just kind of fizzle, making enough, but like, it just still I'm not doing it again. Right. And then Greg comes to me again and he asks me if he can take care of me again. And I felt the overwhelming timing in my body. And I was like, what is this feeling? It was so unfamiliar. I felt so confused at the time, but yet I knew that feeling. And in that moment, I recognized I felt this feeling last time. This is timing, right? And this was the moment I was starting to recognize what that feeling was. It was God's timing. It was God telling me, yes, this is a move forward. This is a green light. And I ignored it the first time and I struggled for that few months. I don't remember how many months, 3 months, 6 months, something like that. And then, so this time I said yes. And as I said yes, I just fell apart. I fell apart right in this man's arms. I was bawling. I was hyperventilating. I was absolutely losing it. I felt like it was an entire lifetime of marathon running. And I didn't even know that I needed to stop and take a break. Like, I just didn't even know. It wasn't even there. It wasn't even in my arena, because when you're getting away from abuse and when you're getting away from trauma, it just feels so good to get away from it. You don't sense anything else except for the joy of getting away from it, right? Like, when you are finally free, it's all you feel. And so at that moment, I trusted the timing, God saying now. And he had asked me, and I wasn't obedient the first time. I just didn't even know, right? Like, I did not honor the guidance inside of me. And then I got my butt kicked for months and it wasn't pretty. And then I finally said yes. And little did I know, as I was sitting there crying, he started crying too. And as this unfolded that week, that month, we realized that, again, only the miraculous creator of all the universe, the source of life, could pull this off. How all of it happened, and the amount of healing that he had by being able to provide for a woman who was genuinely grateful instead of demanding, who was like the first space I've ever been able to have in my whole entire life, the first moment that I was able to rest in a man's arms, the first feeling of like being taken care of. It was so attractive to me. There was so much polarity and chemistry from it. And I had no idea what I was even missing. Like, I just never even knew. And I remember one time I was dating a guy and we went to Dunkin' Donuts and he wanted to buy me a coffee and I was like, no, I got it. And he was like, no, I got it. And I yelled like, no, I'll pay for it. And I realized, because I felt like, no, you'll trap me. You want something and I'm not willing to give that. I'm paying for my own damn coffee. And I'll never forget the look he gave me. And in this moment, while I fall apart in this man's arms, I just realized like, oh, God is giving me my deepest desire without me once again having any clue what my deepest desire was, right? Like, when I made my first million, all I knew was I just wanted to get my kids out of where they were. I didn't care about money and any of that. I understood, looking back, that the money allowed me to create that. And now I very much am aware of the money bringing the freedom for me to be able to bless other people, my children, etc. But then I didn't. I just had timing. I just had that voice inside telling me the timing. And in this moment with Greg, I had no idea that I wanted that chemistry and polarity with a man, and that I would feel deeply feminine being provided for and taken care of that way. And like, to have a man want to take care of you with no strings attached. He never, ever once threw it in my face. he never ever acted like I owed him something. Never. I didn't even know to ask for that. So when we talk about God's timing, we're talking about a more miraculous life than you can even dream up. You can't come up with it. You can't dream this up. There's no access to it through your brain. You can't access it there. So you can make your vision boards and you can manifest. Do it. Definitely do it. It works. It's powerful. It's amazing. But it's long and slow for the most part, right? And even when we think we're manifesting, actually there's God's timing in there that's moving. The whole thing is based on God's timing. And so in the moment when I surrendered to Greg providing for me, which half felt like a defeat, and the other half of me had the courage to trust the timing that I felt inside, right? But half of it still just felt like defeat, like I couldn't do it. I failed. It felt like failure, right? And the beautiful gift that was provided right after that. And then we went through a season of deep and profound healing for Greg, and I was able to be there for him, create a home for the kids, restore, a lot of stuff, and all my gifts I got to use to bring to that relationship, to bring to our family, our home, and my relationship with him. And I wouldn't have never thought that would be part of my life. But that's what it looks like with God's timing. And now Greg and I, only 3 years into our relationship, have a more profound, powerful foundation than most people can build in 20 years. And I really mean that. And that's not me. That's trusting God's timing. That's continuously trusting that voice inside, no matter what my brain is saying, no matter what everybody around me is saying. And so even now I find myself in a season of like, I'm fully provided for. I don't have to work a day in my life if I don't want to. Greg values the energy that I bring to our life and the visioning that I bring to our life and the sense of love that I bring to his kids and him and in our family, right? And so it was interesting for me to try to figure that out. And then I got to remember, like, I don't have to figure it out. There's nothing to figure out. I get to trust God's timing. 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 And I look back. And if you haven't been tuned into the timing and you can't look back and see massive evidence that it's true, it just means you can't see it and recognize it yet, but it's there. And if you can't see it, that's okay. Just use mine. Just use mine. Because for anybody who knows me, I never could have created the stuff that I've created. There's everything, any of it. There's just no way. There's no way on any planet. It's God moving, and my willingness to have the courage to move in his timing, regardless of what anybody has ever thought or said around me, regardless of what my brain's telling me. And in the beginning, it really was a naivety that caused me to do it. Like, I just was like, well, why wouldn't I listen to that? And now I have an understanding of what it is. And I can't say that it's any easier or harder now that I understand what it is. It's not. It's just still what it is. And so what that looks like in my life right now is, as I'm coming back to the business, the last month, I've really been just kind of locking back in, creating the new mastermind. I got rid of all my old courses, although I'll keep them available. They're available in the Facebook groups. They're just not in a membership site anymore because it just feels like such an old energy. But obviously there's a lot of power in there. I was learning everything to get away from abusive people and making money. So we'll sell those as one-offs. But basically it was just like, okay, that is not my life's work, right? That's like a little library that people can pick from if they're in that beginning energy, like trying to break away from the toxic people and trying to first get their wealth vibes going. That is super amazing for them. And I'll have that in the mandyperry.com/shop. And I have that vision. And so what I got from God was like, yeah, let that go. We're not reselling those and doing those live courses and all that, making them a big deal. They'll be available for everybody who wants them at extremely discounted price. And then just keep making your library. And I was like, what do you mean? That's not how we do business. Like, I go from 0 to 100. That's what I do. Like, I make $20,000 courses. I put them out there. They always sell. This is what I do. And I felt that prompting inside, like, nope, not the timing for that. And it was so frustrating because that's like my will is to do that. And this is where I'm so grateful that I have the skill. Like, it's one of the things I'm most grateful for in my entire life because of what it produces over and over. And I cry it out, or I punch my pillow if I need to because I feel frustrated because I just want to do what I want to do. Like, I just want to like create this magic, play high level with people. I just want to play a big game with people. Like, let's opt in at $40K, and at $40,000 for 6 months, you're going to show up huge. And at $40,000 for 6 months, I'm going to show up huge. Now we're playing our best game. Let's go. Let's create the vision that God's created for us, right? But I just felt a no for that. And I was annoyed, and I got annoyed, and I felt my feelings. And then I came back home to myself and said, okay, what do? And like, okay. So then I was just reading. I was just, brainstorming. I was just doing whatever. And then I finally got the green light. And it was like 6 months with Greg. I was like, I don't get the green light, don't get the green light, don't get the green light. And then last week we launched the God Size Game Mastermind. And it was like, I was at the house. I think it was Thursday at the house. And I was like, babe, I got the green light. And I could feel the go. God said go inside of me. And I said that to him the next day. We took off to the Ritz. We went down there just to like get away, have some space, a beautiful, scenery while we were creating the mastermind. And we just literally created the entire mastermind, launched it between Saturday and Sunday. We launched it and it was done. And so I've presented it. We told everybody about it once on Facebook, but nothing else. But I got the green light. And then since then, it's like that mastermind's available. And now what I feel the green light to is like create these mini courses that are super powerful, that'll support my people the best I can. Because every day I wake up and the prompting that I'm given inside is, how can I create more value? How could I create more value for them? What would be extraordinarily valuable for them? So I sit on the back end and I get clear who my client is, and I get clear what they're reaching for. I get clear what vision I hold. I get clear what I'm here to do. I'm here to support people in playing the biggest game they can, to show up at their very best, to give everything they've got. And that doesn't look like what the world tells us it's supposed to look like. For me, it looked like backing off of the business and giving everything I had to Greg and his kids for a while to heal some horrific trauma they had been through. And I gave everything I had to that. I gave everything I had to meshing our family. I gave everything I had to establishing that foundation for Greg and I to grow for the rest of our life on. A bulletproof foundation, and enlisting him in that vision, and asking him to meet me there and play a bigger game like that while he was Mr. Stable and Steady, right? And so as we move through this, and as I step into this, it's consistently coming back home to the truth about what the timing I feel inside of my body is and what I feel called to do. And so while everything in me right now wants to launch a bunch of new courses, I have 10,000 ideas. I actually have sales pages already created. I have graphics already done. I consistently don't feel a green light for that. I feel the green light for creating these one-off powerful courses that will serve my audience tremendously and cause massive, powerful breakthrough in bite-sized pieces where you guys can really absorb it. Like, this training will be 40 minutes or so, right? And that's something that you can do, only now you've just learned an extraordinarily powerful principle about God's timing. Like, do all the manifestation, do the visioning, do the trust, absorb the things that help you have faith in knowing that God's moving in your life and God's in charge and everything is okay and everything's exactly as it's meant to be, because it is, right? Of course, do that. But don't do that in lieu of God's timing. Don't do that and try to force it. Don't do that and miss out on the timing, because if you trust God's timing and that's the only thing that you did was stay tuned in and conscious, stay present to what you feel guided to do, and you actually had the courage to trust God's timing, miracles will continue to happen. Non-stop miracles. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would be with an extraordinary man who provides for me 100% and I don't have to work for the rest of my life if I don't want to, I would laugh at you so hard. Nothing in my brain could have processed on, like, there was just, like, I couldn't even let someone buy me a coffee. Let's be real. Absolutely not. That is the miracle of God's timing. God will tell you yes. God will tell you no. You'll feel tension in your body. You'll feel frustration. God is not a God of confusion and frustration. If you're feeling confusion and frustration, you're forcing something. You're getting caught up in something that you don't belong in. You're over-consuming without being present. Do you know it actually does damage to our brain? When you overconsume, can't you feel it? When your brain starts to go static? I have no idea what you're talking about, Mandy. Who, ADHD me? Yes, you squirrel. That overconsumption and that overanalyzation and that over figuring it out and the over planning will cause you to be completely tone deaf to God's timing. There has to be room for play. There has to be room for spaciousness. There has to be room for you being able to tell the truth about what you feel. And so the way that I locked into God's timing was very intuitive. So in my own journey, I don't have a trick per se on how to tune into it. I just never didn't. And I would say that's probably in large part due to my mother. And I'll share with you what my mother taught me when I was younger. That must have served me tremendously. And she said like this: anytime there's a scenario and you don't know what to do, this or this, take the first scenario, play it all the way out, and feel how you feel in your body. See how it feels at the end of that. Take the second scenario, play it all the way out. See how it feels in your body. Whichever one gives you peace, do that. And I think when she taught me that, I just understood that there's always something that gives you peace in your body. And it wouldn't make any sense that the God and creator of all, the source of all life, the very breath inside of us, the life force inside of us, our chi, wouldn't make any sense at all that that God would communicate to us through anxiety, fear, and confusion. Like, that just makes no sense. It would only make sense that he would talk to us through peace. So while my brain goes like, I don't want peace because peace is boring. I want excitement and adventure, like toxic little abused Mandy inside. I get to breathe through that and I get to feel what gives me peace. And it doesn't mean I can't have peace and excitement. I just don't have peace. I just don't have excitement and chaos or mania or impulsivity or confusion, right? So when, like, if you're at a chronic, constant state of non-peace, then there's some work to do. You're going to need some coaching, some therapy, some, rewiring, some resetting, and some, you really just need to adjust life so that there's some spaciousness. And you need to stop telling a story that you can't and it's impossible. Of course you can, right? I was a single mother with 2 kids, working as a nanny, going to college, and I did. Because here's the thing, and this is up to you to believe, but this is why I believed it, right? Because nothing on paper would have said I had any time to do that. But I did have time. I just couldn't see it, but God could, and I trusted God's timing, and then it happened, and then I had it, right? And so whether the molecular structure of things literally change, whether time literally folds to create it for us because we acted in faith and it literally transforms and that's how we get there, I don't know. Or if it was just always that way and we couldn't see it, I don't know. Maybe it's a mixture of both. I don't really need to know. Buddha taught me that well. The one thing when I went through studying all of that was like, we waste our life thinking we need to know everything. No, you don't. You're never going to know it in your brain. You just know it in your body. This is definitely a game of being back home in our body. So you'll feel guidance and a yes and no and a prompting for you to do things that require financial investment, whether it's like a massage or hiring a team or a coach, or it's, taking time off of work, whatever it is, it'll require financial resource, or it'll require time, or it'll require space, right? And we'll feel like we can't. Right, but that's you overriding God. So who do you think's got it figured out better? The life breath source of all of the entire galaxy? All of creation? Or you? Chances are it's probably God. And when I just have the bandwidth for this silly little conversation we're having, like when I just have the bandwidth to say, probably God knows better, they're like, but how do I know I'm hearing from God? Stop it. Knock it off. That is your brain's way of trying to stop you and procrastinate you from doing the brave thing that you're being asked to do. Anytime you're like, how do I know? You just opted into your brain and left your body. You left what God was saying and your presence to it, and you went into your brain and started resisting it. I'm confused. I don't know. That's not real. God is not a God of confusion. Therefore, all confusion is not of God. Therefore, it's not real. It's not reality, actually. So you can say, I can't access the clarity right now. I can't access the peace right now. Okay, go for a walk, set a meditation. Probably don't scroll Netflix or scroll YouTube and drink wine. Probably that's not going to get you there. Maybe have the glass of wine after you tune in and tell yourself the truth, right? Or not at all. And this is just how it is, right? Like, but the pay, like the byproduct of that is, I don't know, millions of dollars, impact all over the world, the greatest love story of all time, a home that's full of love and peace and expansion, wisdom, infinite amounts of wisdom, the kind of wisdom that when you show up at the table and bring it, lives change, people heal, leave a wake of healing everywhere you go, leave inspiration, have overflows of joy. Also, yeah, you have meltdowns and resistance and cranky days, and because you're human. And until we're enlightened, that's how it's going to be, right? I don't have any anticipation of being enlightened in this lifetime, but I'm going to keep trusting God's timing. If he desired to get me there, he certainly could. I definitely couldn't, but he could. It's safe to trust God's timing. It's safe to slow down enough, create enough space, and trust the timing. And I'm going to say this. I feel like this is a rather large statement to make. So I'm just going to tune in to make sure it feels aligned. Yes, this feels absolutely true to me. It is wiser to take massive action and back the timing that you sense and back the guidance that you feel than to hesitate and not. It's better to do it and make mistakes than to not do it, because in the motion, in the action, when you move, that is an act of faith. And when you move in an act of faith, God meets you there. And so whatever you need to figure out, you become someone different. Einstein said you can't solve a problem from the same frequency that created it. Just means the same thinking that got me here, and the repetitive thinking, the repetitive vision, the repetitive, this is what reality seems like to me, the repetitive, these are my habits, behaviors. That same frequency can't solve the problem. You have to move to a new frequency. Action, brave, aligned action moves you to a new frequency. So you become someone different, and that you become looks back, and it's so much easier to solve whatever the thing was that was so hard when you were the frequency that created it. So it's infinitely safer. Yeah, I 100% back this. It's infinitely smarter and safer for you to consistently take massive action to back the prompts, guidance, and timing that you feel inside than it ever will be for you to sit there trying to make sure, trying to, etc., because some people live their whole entire life doing that. And there's a difference between impulsivity and acting in God's timing. The difference is impulsivity comes with a lot of mania and chaos and hype. Moving in God's timing often feels like, okay, but there's a deep peace inside. You feel aligned. You feel like you're being the right you. You don't feel like you're throwing stuff at the wall to try to make it stick to see what happens. Those feel different. And you can find what subtleties inside of you. You know you best. You are your own unique masterpiece. And so just taking the time to tune in and be really clear, like, when I am listening to God's timing, how does it feel? In the past, when I've acted on God's timing, how does that feel? And when I'm being impulsive and manic, how does that feel? Feels like squirrel. Okay, let me just tune in to see if there's anything else that I want to share about this. Well, the only other thing I want to say about this is looking up scripture, whether it's from the Bible or it's from your favorite teachers, about what God's will is for our life. And I know for a lot of people that can be triggering. Just bear with me. It used to be very triggering for me. Eckhart Tolle helped me through that tremendously. He brought the word God back in my world, and Paramahansa Yogananda brought Jesus back into my world. And some of these enlightened masters have really brought me back home to Jesus and my own faith. And hearing God's promises about what his will is for us, like God wants good for us. He wants healing. He only brings us somewhere good. It can be really challenging if we don't have a clear faith about it. You don't have to be like, I'm specifically a Christian metaphysics, Mandy. I'm specifically blah, blah, blah. It's just the label, right? The label, that's the ego. The ego needs a label. The ego needs to say, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this is like beliefs are just thoughts, and thoughts are literally irrelevant. They're so irrelevant. It's not even funny. It's just a thought. It's like this external poof. It's like just like a cloud moving by, right? It's like saying all of life is a cloud. It's so silly. So it doesn't really matter the label. What matters is you have your own faith and clarity about what you feel God is to you and what God's intelligent intention is for you. Like there's clearly an intelligent force on the planet. I call that God. I call it source, right? Whatever it is, there's a powerful, intelligent force on the planet moving all of life. We are nature. You and I are just nature, like all the rest of nature. And God is the hand of nature, right? And we can see there's some kind of intelligent force. Whatever that intelligent force is, if it's intelligent, it means it has some kind of purpose and intention, some kind of thought towards you, some kind of whatever you want to call it. I'll call it an intention. And do you believe that intention is good? So good. So good. And this is what I know. All the enlightened masters, the OG himself, Jesus, taught us God is love. And love is a verb. You take action. It's an action. It's a creation, right? And so when we choose to calibrate to love, we are meant to express it. We're meant to express that love because God is the creator. God is love and he's the creator, which means we operating in that frequency are creators ourselves, which means we would have an expression of it. And so we're meant to have guidance as we express from infinite intelligence. And what do you think your life will turn out like if you keep trusting that infinite intelligence, no matter what your brain and everybody else around you is saying? If the infinite intelligence of the infinite creator of the whole entire creation is prompting and guiding you, how do you think your life will turn out? If you have wounds here, religious wounds here, you're going to want to tend to those, because otherwise you'll hesitate and you'll feel like, maybe God's going to use me for something bad. How do I know? And surrendering to God's will, what does that look like for you? And what does that mean, right? There's some good work there. There's some good work. And before I even had any answers to that, I just innately knew that that thing inside of me was guiding me somewhere better. It wanted good for me. Life itself wants to bring the very best it can to us. Just like when we have people over our house, we want them to have the best experience and the best bed and mattress and pillows and the best view of the house. We want them to have the best experience. What do you think life wants for us? Life wants the most beautiful, best experience of life it could possibly bring to you, but you must choose it. And if you walk around hesitating, thinking you know better than all of creation all the time, then it's going to be a bumpy road for you. And you don't need to have it all metaphorically figured out to your brain. But there has to be a trust inside of the body, a trust and an understanding of your place and how vastly beneath this infinite intelligence you are, unless you're tuned in and activated with that infinite intelligence, then you're infinite potential and infinite power. She said bluntly, it is what it is. Okay, of course, if you want any coaching on this, it is my honor and my pleasure. Just reach out. I've gotten many questions. The current offer is the new mastermind right now. It's called the God Size Game. The whole point of this mastermind is to play the God-sized game. The big visions and dreams God's put inside of you to have enough faith, enough courage, enough diligence to show up massively. When we're 95 looking back on our life, we'll know we showed up and gave everything we've got, and we trusted, we allowed the blessings to just pour into our life, like 7,000 blessings just sitting there waiting, but we're saying, no, we can't because, or no, this is too hard, or no, this person's to blame, and we block them all. Well, we're unblocking all of them, allowing them all in, trusting God's timing, trusting the guidance within, trusting our vision. It was given to us for a reason. You were born for such a time as this. And that's the point of the mastermind. You've got my magic and Greg's structure and stability, business, whiz, structure, 3D-ness. That's what I'm going to call that. Nobody tell if I described it that way. Oh my goodness. Okay. I hope this training served you really well. If you're in the mastermind, come inside of the group and share with us. If you're not, come over to Made for Miracles free Facebook group and just share what comes up for you. It's an incredibly safe, vulnerable space where you can get that mastermind feel, and a lot of like-minded people doing the same work, and just come share everything. Tell us everything. Okay, I love you so much.